Hello. What's happening? Hello. 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 Hello.
Everybody's elite.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You know, we just flew down from London, and I got to tell you something about London. It's fantastic now because a lot of bankers have decided to commit suicide. So, you know, we do our show. We got this great view overlooking the city of London, the Square Mile, and there's all these new towers, the gherkin, the cheese grater. And I got my binoculars, and I'm like, oh, there goes another one. You know, because they feel guilty, basically, don't they? After having bankrupted the entire nation for years, finally their conscience is catching up to them. But it's fantastic to be invited here this evening to speak to you all. And the point of my presentation at this time is to run through with you some of the salient points that we must consider at this historic juncture in history, where you all have the ability to rid yourself of a plague of locusts that have, well, like Fred Goodwin, for example, the parasite, the tapeworm, a man who lived most of his life in the anus of a Cocker Spaniel as a tapeworm, until that day he was pooped out and became head of the Royal Bank of Scotland of RBS, and inflicted upon this country and the banks around the world his parasitical behavior of collateralizing everything he could possibly see, including his belly button lint, and selling it to Germans. Until there was nothing left. And then you all had to buy it. You all had to bail him out. You all had to buy it. Now you'd be paying. You'd be paying for the bailouts. Yeah, you don't want to pay for the bailouts, basically. You don't want to be encumbered with all this debt. RBS has a lot of debt that basically, you're not responsible for. But what you are responsible for, and let me make this point clear, is a shitload of oil. What you are responsible for, the UK has got a lot of hydrocarbons, and 90% of it is owned by Scotland. And even at this stage of the game, there's 1.5 trillion pounds worth of revenues to be garnered by exploitation of that North Sea oil. That's 1.5 trillion pounds. So that's a lot of money. And even in the context of any debt scenario that any politician believes that they can foist upon you in any circumstances, that's still a lot of money. Scotland's a 220 billion pound economy versus 1.5 trillion pounds of future revenue. That's a couple of little restructuring tricks. Call up Jinping Pao down there in Beijing, sell a few of those barrels forward, pay off all the debt, and you've got a pretty clean balance sheet, for one thing. So this idea that you've got an overwhelmingly detrimental and cumbersome debt obligation is completely bogus. But here's another thing that you have, which you should definitely make sure that you get back into your hot little hands. And it's really shiny, and it's gold. There's 300 tons of gold at the Bank of England, supposedly. So just a rough estimate, y'all are owed at least 100 tons. That's $4 billion. So that's half the national debt paid off right there. Now here's the great thing about having $4 billion worth of gold sitting in the Bank of England, is that George Osborne, David Cameron, Tony Blair, the Queen, George Osborne. I'm not talking about Elton John, by the way. I'm talking about the woman in Buckingham Palace. They, over the past few decades have been playing games with the gold, because gold is something that is something of a barometer of your economic health. And if gold price goes up, it means that your economic policies maybe are not so good. So what this government has been doing, particularly in the city of London, is that they've been selling a lot of what's called paper gold. They sell a lot of paper contracts, futures contracts in the market to drive the price of gold down. And as a result, here we are in 2014, and it's widely believed, and I believe this to be true, is that the gold that the Bank of England says that they don't have. This has been shipped off to what are called bullion banks, who have sold it off to China, Russia, Iran. You know, Russia's been buying a lot of gold, thousands of tons. China's been buying thousands of tons. Where do they get the gold? They've been buying more gold than the countries who produce gold produce in any given year. They've been buying more gold than we've seen on any official marketplaces in the physical market than for 10 years. Where do they get that gold? They get it from the Bank of England. Because the Bank of England is concerned about the paper price of shit and not the real price of an economy. And as a result, if you, in Scotland, demand delivery of your 100 tons of gold, you will force the Bank of England into the open market to buy, to cover the gold that they don't have, and it's a fucking gun to their head!
Yay!
It's a gun to their head! Okay, if Cameron opens his fat fucking mouth, or there's Osborne, Pudgy Georgie Osborne, say, give me the gold right now or shut the fuck up. Okay? And they have no answer to that, because they sold the gold. And you are owed the gold. That's $4 billion in gold. Now let's go back to what Gordon Brown did. What did Gordon Brown do in the early 1990s? Okay, he got a call from the BBC guy, Davies' wife, who was working with Goldman Sachs, his secretary. And they got the call, Gordon Brown said, Gordon, you know, Goldman Sachs is short gold in America. And we want you, Britain, to sell your gold to drive the price down so that our friends in New York at Goldman Sachs can cover their short. And what did Gordon Brown do? He sold 400 tons of your gold. Gordon Brown sold 400 tons of the UK's gold. The UK went from number 8 of the top gold owners to 18. He sold it at the worst price in decades. He told the market before he was going to sell it that he was going to sell it. He sold it in installments that guaranteed the worst possible price. And as a result, he went from having 700 tons of gold to 300 tons of gold. But I figure you're owed 100 tons. Right now, that's $4 billion. But let's go back in time and say, you know, Gordon Brown sold that gold illegally. The Bank of England did not authorize that sale. It was even the Telegraph covered this and noticed that this is completely done with without any legal basis whatsoever. So you're owed at least another 100 tons. So now you got 200 tons. That's $8 billion. That's I think your deficit. That's cleaned up. That's gone. Now you've got the oil you're pre-selling to the Chinese. Your long-term deficit's gone. Now you've got an English-speaking population that's got a high-tech corridor that can compete with fucking Ireland and give everyone a tax break. Now you're going to be the Scottish Tiger. Okay, you've got all the assets here. You've got no debt. You've got gold. You've got English-speaking people. You've got the ability to, if you're independent, to cut corporate tax rates down to compete with Ireland. Why not? Why should Ireland be the only English-speaking country in the region with an educated workforce that Google and Facebook and all these numbskulls can come and open up offices and hire thousands of people? Thousands of people. So all those people in the oil industry who are afraid of losing their job, well, their kids are going to become entrepreneurs, and you got all the resources here. The bankers and the insurance brokers and all those folks who are going to lose their job, well, I suggest jumping off a fucking building because you're worthless scum. You've done nothing but basically Okay, yeah! That always gets the applause. People love to call bankers scum. Of course they do. I did bring some a few notes with me to let's see, Dave Cameron. Oh, here's some interesting. I lived in news clippings always fascinate me. Here's a guy who protested Barclays by shitting in the main branch there. Okay, so here's a guy. What's wrong? This is the wrong kind of deposit. Yuck, yuck, yuck. Barclays bank customer poops all over the floor. And here they got an actual picture of the poop on the floor. There you go. Now, the thing about Fred Goodwin, he would see that and immediately collateralize that as a poop obligation bond and sell for billions of dollars. And then when it went bust, he'd put you on the hook for it, for 20 years, all that obligation. That's why I need to get rid of these, what I call financial terrorists. Here's a good one from today's paper. This is really fascinating stuff, because of course, this is an historic day today. Let's see if I can read this. On September 11th, which of course today is September 11th. I see you nodding your head, sir. Exactly. But in the year, September 11th, in the year 1297, Scottish forces led by Wallace defeated a far larger English army of the Battle of Stirling Bridge. A bloody affair in which the English were forced onto a narrow bridge which collapsed, drowning all the bankers. It's like, history repeats itself. Of course. Wallace, what's this say on the head? He, by having the skin, he celebrated. He said, by having the skin from the dead body of Edward's treasurer cut into Bruce, the future king. No, I read that, it goes up to paragraph 3, column 2. Fed into the pieces, and he gave them out as grisly souvenirs. Wallace had, quote, a broad strip taken from the head to the heel to make therewith a baldric for his sword. That's the kind of shit you got going on in your DNA. If you see a banker, skin him. Turn him into a baldric for your sword. Which I guess today would be like a condom or something. Let's see what else. Here's the FT, which I read, of course, religiously to get all my material. Oh, baby, this is what they had to say. A fear of numbers has left many Britons unable to assess the arguments of politicians and officials due to financial and economic illiteracy. They suffer from a numeracy deficit. Okay? So this is what they're banking on. When you see the BBC now on Channel 4 and you see Osborne and Cameron, or you see somebody from BP or these oil companies, and they go on TV and they're counting on the fact that they believe that you have a numeracy deficit and that you have financial and economic illiteracy. This is what they believe is the case. They believe that they are so frickin' smart that you can't possibly comprehend how they're fucking up the ass. Now, on the same paper, they say the unsophisticated client was the prize at Goldman Sachs and RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland. The goal was to sell the most complicated financial product to the least sophisticated investor. So now we've got a pattern of abuse. You got people who, on the top line, are saying that these people are so stupid, we can sell them a bag of shit and they won't know the difference. Listen to this. This is from Reuters, October 24th. Royal Bank of Scotland dealt with out-of-the-money hedges on its recent commercial property repackaging, Isabel Finance number 1, by bringing in an unidentified AAA counterparty to write the swaptions against adverse interest rate moves. The Isabel prospectus does not explain how the swaptions work, but it does detail that there are 7 swaptions in the structure with the payout aligned to the exposure profile of the portfolio. Okay, the counterpart of this was Bank of England. So Bank of England is involved in engaging in a derivative trade that ingratiates and puts money into the pocket of bankers who are counting on you, believing that you're economically illiterate. They think that this in the paper can go by unnoticed. that you can't see in an instant that this is nothing more than a shell game, a Ponzi scheme, a fraud, a racket made with bankers and politicians and rating agencies working together as a racket. They are racketeers to steal and abuse and defraud. The money you don't have in your pocket today is in their pocket. Not because they are smart, not because they're lucky, not because they're educated, not because they're the friends of politicians, but because they're crooked, they're fraudsters, they're banksters, they're heinous individuals. They, as William Wallace would have done, would have flayed them on the spot and turned their skin into a bodkin for a sword, because this shit should not pass. You are the victim of financial fraud, ladies and gentlemen. That's the main problem in this country. Am I screaming too loud? People are like, what the fuck is he, why is he screaming? He seemed like such a nice guy on TV. Why is he screaming? Where's Stacy? I thought Stacy would be here. I only listen to Stacy. I don't even like Max. I don't like Max, I like Stacy. He never makes any sense.
Being loud up.
Riveresco! Yeah, here's another fun trick. So, to give you an idea of how these frauds are perpetrated, collateral reuse fuels market. In the US, the SEC restricts prime brokers' use of rehypothecated collateral from their clients, but in England, by contrast, they impose no such constraint. These collateral chains can become awesome engines of contagion. Fewer trusted counterparties in the market owing to the elevated counterparty risk. This leads to stranded pools of liquidity. What does that mean? That means that unlike in America, in England, I can take a 1,000-pound bond and I can sell it not to one bank, 2 banks, 3 banks, 4 banks, but to an infinite number of banks. The exact same bond. I can sell an infinite number of times, as they call here, infinite rehypothecation, without any collateral whatsoever. And of course, when it comes time to pay off those bonds and there's no money to pay off those bonds, you have a crash like you had in 2008, and the bankers will say, well, it's legal. It's legal. We are legally allowed for infinite rehypothecation to sell the same table to 20 different people and get 20 different fees, and that's okay, according to the current banking laws in Britain. You know, we do our show in London because it's the global headquarters of global banking fraud. Every major scandal of the last 10, 15 years has gone through London. The Barclays LIBOR scandal, Madoff scandal, AIG scandal, LIBOR, Forex. They all go through London because of this rule that allows banks to engage in infinite rehypothecation, selling the same shit over and over and over again. I mean, you've got businesses, you've got families, you've got kids at home. I mean, if you've got a business and your business is selling donuts and you can sell the same fucking donut 1,000 times and get a fee every single time, and there's no risk in that person ever claiming that they never got their donut, you'd be a donut billionaire, like Fred Goodman. So what Fred Goodman, that's what he did. He took the same real estate portfolio on the same 5 properties and sold them 1,000 times, 2,000 times, 3,000 times, sold them as repackaged securities and repackaged securities to the banks who sold them back to each other and sold them all again for a fee. And they did it all again as a Ponzi scheme. It go up and up and up until suddenly in 2008, boom, margin call, nobody can pay, crash. First time in history that governments bailed out the creditors. If you go back and read your Bible, you know, the whole idea is you bail out the debtors. The debtors get bailed out. You never bail out the creditors. Because what would happen? They would just do the exact same thing again, which of course they just did. In the last 6 years, they rebuilt the entire Ponzi scheme over again. Stock market, new high. Real estate London, new high. Real estate bubble all over the world. Stock market bubble, bond market bubble. That's not from growth from wages. That's not growth from manufacturing. That's not growth from any economic activity. That's growth from money printing to bail out the creditors. Because the politicians bailed out the creditors. They didn't bail out the debtors. They didn't bail out you guys. This is the first time in history this has ever really been the case on a global basis. And the result is what? Your wages are stagnant. Your wages aren't going up. Your lifestyle isn't going up. You're not participating in this so-called recovery. Why? Because you didn't participate in the bailout. You don't know George Osborne. You're not inside the Goldman Sachs. Now let's move on. Today's Sun newspaper, David Cameron says, quote, an independent Scotland would be at greater risk from terror attacks. Right? I don't know. I like playing with this for some reason. That might be the perfect height. Hello. Yes, this is the perfect height. Okay, so apparently you're at greater risk of terror attacks as it would lose the protection of Britain, that's you, in Britain and Scotland, lose the protection of Britain's military and security services. Quitting the UK is wrong. The world is a dangerous place. It's better to be in the UK with our top-heavy defense budget. Now let's go back in time to, because David Cameron is so concerned about terrorism and he's so concerned about your safety. And the UK government just loves you so much. And the UK government is so concerned that you wake up in the morning and sunshine and rainbows come out of your asshole and unicorns parade on a sunshine day. And it's a beautiful morning in Scotland. And let's go back to the Blair administration. You know, Blair and Cameron, right? They're basically the same bunch of crooks, right? You know, Prince Bandar, the Saudi, was being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office for a slush fund, £200 million slush fund with BAE, British Aerospace. British Aerospace, one of these top-heavy defense budget people mentioned by Cameron. And the Serious Fraud Office was investigating the slush fund between BAE and Prince Bandar of Saudi Arabia. So his Financial Times started covering, and it started to get, a lot of coverage, a lot of nervous people. Prince Bandar went into Tony Blair's office at number 10 Downing Street, this is fully documented, and said, look, Tony, if you don't call off this investigation into the slush fund between me and BAE, I can't guarantee another 7/7 bus bombing won't happen in the center of London. A sitting prime minister threatened by a Saudi prince in number 10 Downing Street with an act of terror in London. And what did Tony do? Fuck me, fuck me, fuck me! Fuck me up the ass, Prince Bandar! I'm Tony Blair! I work for the Saudis! I like them to fuck me in the ass! That was Tony Blair. So is David Cameron any different? No, he's not. So Gordon Brown, of course, he sold all of Britain's gold. Price of gold and silver completely manipulated. The U.S. sent to drop a 4-year probe into silver price manipulation. The identities of J.P. Morgan's silver manipulation exposed by Robert Gottlieb. They picked up all this silver when they bought Bear Stearns as part of the crash. The amount of money it takes to move silver up is 50 times greater than what's needed to move the price down. This is the way the market is skewed by the paper, the futures market. So it's not a market where $1 million shows up to buy or sell and you see action. You need 50 times more to move it up than move it down. So this is a market that is completely and utterly screwed. Let's talk a moment about RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland. £17 million bonus for thieving RBS unit. This is the group within RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, the global restructuring group. They went out and they destroyed businesses on purpose to scalp profits that didn't belong to them. They pushed businesses into insolvency. They intercepted payments and put it into their own bank accounts. They stripped assets and sold assets illegally without customer knowledge. They were called by Lawrence Tomlinson a vampire bank. They also were operating illegally in the accounts of NatWest and Coots customers. Did they really suffer any consequences as a result of all this activity? No, that's the Royal Bank of Scotland, who's now starting to leave. Well, is that a bad thing? If you had, cockroaches and they all threatened to leave, well, would you be like, oh shit, I really love those cockroaches. They're leaving? Oh no. Oh no, what will we do without those cockroaches? Here's one. Documents prove the ties of RBS to the Bin Laden family. Nice bank. Here's Lloyd's, where toxic bonus targets made staff missell to themselves. This is where it gets really creepy. The fraud in these bankers, it's not about even ripping people off, ripping governments off, ripping other governments off, or ripping other countries off, or ripping other people off, or ripping people off on other planets, other dimensions. Go backwards in time and rip people off in the past. They'll rip anybody off. So they're ripping themselves off. So the Lloyd's was fined 28 million pounds for operating a toxic culture that led one desperate salesman to missell policies to himself. Okay? That's the people who are threatening to leave your country. If you vote to be independent of these people. They're saying, we're going to leave your country. These are the people. Now, he was doing so to avoid automatic demotion. So to keep himself at that level where he's paying, on that BMW, he's mis-selling products to himself. Citigroup ordered to pay $285 million derivatives fraud. They stuff a portfolio with risky mortgages, related investments, sell it to unsuspecting customers, and then bet against it. So here's Citigroup betting against their own customers. So they package up $285 million worth of derivatives, as I just explained, infinite rehypothecation. Take the same 20 mortgages and repackage them 100 times and sell them back to each other and sell them to some pension account. And then, because the pension account owns these toxic securities, start making bets against the company that just bought the thing you just sold them. That's Citigroup. That's all. It could be RBS, could be any of these. Goldman Sachs, they packaged their subprime, they sold them to customers, then bet against those customers. So it's another example of that. During the subprime crisis, Goldman Sachs, not only did they fraudulently make the loans, they fraudulently securitized the loans, they fraudulently sold those loans off, and then they fraudulently made bets against customers who bought their fraudulent loans. So again, do you really want these people in your society? Are you like me with binoculars hoping they all jump out of windows? It's, these are, here's a good one from the Wall Street Journal from 2005. Lessons from the brain damaged investor. So a UK investment banker at one major investment bank, they use psychometric testing to recruit psychopaths because their characteristics were exactly suited for senior corporate finance roles. One of these bankers was U.S. soldier Robert Bales, who went on to Afghanistan and massacred 16 civilians. But he's a hell of a stockbroker. So they're actively recruiting psychopaths. They want to determine that you are mentally unstable. They want to make sure that you have no empathy, because empathy is the enemy of profits. I read something in the Financial Times last week. They talked to this rich guy and said, hey, do you concern yourself with macroeconomics? Because no, I never bother if there's a war in Iraq or Afghanistan or if Gaza just got slaughtered or whatever. I never bother looking at that stuff because it doesn't make any difference. And the FT was saying, yeah, that's so true. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop looking at the news. Well, the way it works is if you don't have any empathy and you don't care what the consequences of your actions are, yeah, you too can be a freaking multimillionaire. And then you can also, here's another, bankers like JP Morgan are buying insurance on their own bankers, basically, and there's some speculation actually that they're the ones who are killing them. So. A Bank of England official stabbed himself to death. Christopher Diamond, 52, found in the car after stabbing himself to death. Again, I ask you, do we care? What? Do we? Do we care? Let me explain and give you a graphic demonstration, because this is, after all, the anniversary of 9/11. And what I'd like to do now, actually, I'd like a little water. That's okay. A little glass of water, check the time. This is already Saturday? How is that possible? That's not possible. When did I start this thing? Oh, I see, yes, we're about halfway through. Okay, so I'm gonna do, I'm gonna give you a reenactment of 9/11 as I understand. I've done a lot of research into the, what was happening before. Of course, 13 years ago, today, was the epically tragic events in New York City, 9/11. Thank you, that was fantastic. Oh, thank you. So, I don't know if any of you watch my show, but No, because you just watched Stacy. That's right. Like, who is this guy? Well, I thought we were watching Stacy. No, on my show we've had many times Jim Rickards. Jim Rickards, he wrote 2 books so far, Currency Wars and Death of Money. And in the latest book, Death of Money, in the very first chapter, he writes about 9/11. He writes about something I've been saying for 13 years, that in the days leading up to those events, in the options market, where people can buy and sell or make bets based on how stocks are going to do in a very highly leveraged way, there was an incredibly unusual activity in those airline stocks that were involved in 9/11. American Airlines was one of them. So the options trading, and options are very, they're like a barometric reading of the markets. They give you, and I used to trade options on Wall Street. That was my primary business. I was the number 2 or 3 biggest options producer in the Shearson Lehman Hutton system in 1989. I did over $1 million of business that year trading just options, which if you know anything about the options market, you know that's a lot of options, because options are highly leveraged. That's over $1 billion face value securities just trading options. So I know this options market very, very well. And I know that it's very, for example, when the Space Challenger shuttle blew up, Morton Thiokol, who is the contractor on the solid fuel booster rocket, that stock, I was able to buy puts on that stock fast enough to benefit from that tragedy. Okay, so but that's Wall Street. So before Christy McAuliffe hit the water, we were already making money. We were already cashing in. We already had Morton sold short. We already had 10,000, at the money. Just give them all to me. So here we are, 3 days before 9/11, and those airline stock puts, which are the negative bets, show you people are getting real negative about this, are skyrocketing in both volume and price. Volume and price. There's a lot of talk on Wall Street. There's a lot of talk in Alex Brown, which is a firm I worked for. People who were there were talking about these airline stocks and talking about some crazy thing about to happen. People at Cantor Fitzgerald, which is a bank on the top floor of the World Trade Center, were talking about these options and rumors of a crazy action about to happen in the very near future. I had just sold my company to Cantor Fitzgerald. I was in touch with Cantor Fitzgerald. So in the days leading up to these events, there's an enormous amount of chatter out there about the big event coming in New York. You got to get in on these options, details to follow. The number 1 guy at the CIA, his number 2 guy was a guy named Buzzy Krongard, who was responsible for the daily intelligence brief to the White House. He had just joined the CIA from Alex Brown. Alex Brown, it turns out, was doing all the booking all the trades for these options. After the event, there was millions of dollars left in the accounts of Alex Brown that was never collected. This is documented in the official 9/11 report. I've pieced together a story that there was a broker in Tower 2 who, after the first tower went down, instead of saving himself, stayed behind to trade puts and died. Get that into your head. Here's a guy, probably Morgan Stanley. First tower goes down. He's thinking, do I stay and make a shitload of money, or is that plane that just blew into the second building going to blow it too, and I should get out of here with my life? The evidence suggests they chose door number 1. So let me reenact that for you visually. Here we are, 9/11, 13 years ago. This will represent the first tower. This will represent the first plane. Here's everyone's waking up on that day, and it's a beautiful day in New York, and then all of a sudden, some wacky shit's going on the radars. Dun dun. Dun dun. Oh my God, something's off course. That plane's not going in the right way. Up. It's heading for New York. Everyone's scared. Call the media. Something's happening. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it's heading for the World Trade Towers. Oh, whoa, whoa, here's tower number 1, whoa. Oh no, the media has called up every single news agency in the world. We're all going to cover this thing. Oh my, there's something happening in New York. Is it an accident? Is it terrorism? What's going on? Let's go to tower number 2. And there is our broker for Morgan Stanley. He just saw his buddies blow up in tower number 1. He's a psychopathic broker. He was hired by his company because he's a psychopath. Keep that in mind. He's a financial terrorist. He made bets against Christy McAuliffe. He thinks that the Bhopal incident in India was hilarious. Tons of jokes about it. Ha 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 ha! He thinks he's immortal. He thinks nothing can touch him. He just saw a building collapse. He's just about to collapse. It's on fire. Then out of the sky, building number 2. He looks at those options. He says, oh my God, the American airline puts are up 7,000%. I'm making millions. I'm making millions. And here comes the plane number 2. Do I win? Do I stay? Do I trade more? What should I do? And there goes the American dream. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that is the mentality. That was my big set piece, by the way. Special effects. Boy, I did that recently for a documentary film made by George Galloway. Now, let me ask you something. What the fuck happened to George Galloway? Here's a guy who does nothing but fight for the freedom of independent countries around the world. He sounds like he's from Scotland. Why doesn't 2 + 2 equal 4 in this instance? I have no idea. Does anyone understand Galloway's argument in this situation? No. Doesn't make any sense, does it? I'm throwing him off RT, that's it. Get off! Get off my network! How many people watch RT? No, that's cool. How many people watch Russell Brand? How many people watch BBC?
And they need to start coin for you.
Start coin? That's good. BBC calls me up now, and I don't even go on anymore. They used to, when you call BBC, they say, first of all, they call you up and they say, come on the show. They go, okay, when and where? Well, first, what are you going to say? And I'll say, well, my position is this. And they'll say, don't, hold on, we'll get back to you. Then they get back to you and say, tell us more about your position. And I say this, and this. That's very interesting. We'll get back to you. Then the third call comes. We can't use you. Then I watch BBC, and they bring in some other guy who just stole all my material, because they just got it from me for free on the phone, who's making the same silly points, but against a guy who's not going to rebut. So I'm like, guess what? Fuck you. I'm not going on the BBC. I'll go on, Have I got news for you, because that's a funny show. It's just comedy. I mean, the BBC should just focus on comedies and nature shows. Don't even try to do the news. It's absurd. The bias is insane. Now, look, Russia today, it's funded. Russia's government funds it, but it's not a mouthpiece for fucking Kremlin. The BBC is a mouthpiece for goddamn Westminster. They don't have an independent view in that piece. Can I go on the BBC or Channel 4 and talk about HSBC, the fact that they admitted laundering money for Hezbollah, they paid a small fine, and that's it? That they're financing terrorism, and let's talk about it? They don't deny it. Let's have a discussion about that. Why don't we talk about HSBC laundering money for the Mexican drug cartels? Whoever's there at the BBC now, whoever you are, that's not going to happen. They just won't do it. They never had me on until recently. They wanted me on Channel 4. They said, "Oh, come on, Channel 4, and talk about Ukraine." I'm like, I've been here for 2 years. So let's talk about the banks. I'm talking about fucking Ukraine. Talk some Ukrainian. I'm not Ukrainian. I'm an American. America! I don't know about that. Russell Brand's good. The artist taxi driver, he's good. Frankie Boyle, he's good. All right, I'm going to go into my part 2 of my show here. I'm doing well on time. So I got a few more things to talk about. We'll see how this goes. Here's some of the times. Are you short of cash? Try the austerity sandwich. Scientists claim the cheapest lunch in Britain. It consists of 2 slices of bread surrounding a filling of another slice of bread. The cost is 7.5p. Actually, it was a story in the Times. The Bank of England's caught in LIBOR rigging and now caught in collusion with Treasury and trying to hide £48 billion black hole of debt as part of the $37 billion stolen from when Osborne lowered rates over the period after the crisis and stole all that money from pensioners. Now they created a huge black hole, and now the Bank of England was caught hiding it. Wells Fargo in America, nickel and dimes clients to death. A malicious algorithm designed to maximize client pain while ignoring actual sequence of events, with the net result of an overdraft balance that is 4 times higher than what it would have been if proper temporal sequence had been followed. That's one of the things about it. If you've got one of these new iPhone 6, they got a payment system that's hooked into your bank. You know, they've got malicious algorithms. You know, suddenly your overdraft fees are going to be like, chick, 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 chick. It's going to be, I don't know what happened. It was a malicious algorithm. You know, call customer service. Here's a good one. You know, NHS, of course. Here's what I can say without a shadow of a doubt. The NHS is being privatized, and the NHS in Scotland is going to be privatized. If you want your NHS not to be privatized, you can't vote for any other vote but yes for independence. I mean, any other vote, your NHS is going to be completely fucking privatized. I mean, there's no doubt about it. All these companies, you know, TTIP is a global trade agreement that gives American corporations dominion over your entire corporate system in this country and countries around the world. You don't want that. Okay, your costs, your NHS costs are going to go up. If you're naive to believe that that's not the case, I mean, it's already, what's happening in England is pretty shocking. The amount of inroads that the private contractors have made into the NHS, they've really ripped the guts out of it. And that's definitely not on. To give you an idea where this heads, where this goes, when you let private contractors own your health system, when you let Blackwater, when you let Warren Buffett type people, when you let private equity groups and hedge funds own your private health system, this is what happens. Here's the story. Isaac's dentist was dispatched to his high school. No, Isaac Gagon stepped off the school bus sobbing last October. His mother saw steel crowns on his teeth. A dentist statement in his backpack said he had received 2 root canals, the crowns, and 10 x-rays at school without parental notification. The company responsible for this is a company called Healthcare America, a dental management services company that's in the portfolio of Morgan Stanley's private equity group, and deals in 22 states and deals with 1.5 million patients. So to make their yacht payments, they go around and get kids in school and give them involuntary root canals.
When was that?
Hello? What's going on here? Somebody's out there. I don't know. Look it up. Here is the headline was "Dental Abuse Seen Driven by Private Equity Investment." But I'll do the research for you. Okay. Here's one. A government report suggests raising interest rates on all student debts issued. Oh, this man has to go throw up. The story was so outrageous. He's got to vomit.
Okay.
Are you heading out? Nice to see you.
Sorry.
No problem. It's okay. A government report suggests raising interest rates on all student debt issued over the past 15 years is affecting 3.6 million students. It's a $40 billion debt market. They're going to raise the debt retroactively on $40 billion worth of students in the UK to make the debt more attractive to be resold onto the Rothschild Investment Bank. Adding extra years, stretching over the entire working career of a student. There's the problem with the Rothschild Investment Group. They objected to the fact that the student loans had caps on the way that the interest rates, how high they could go. So they negotiated with the UK government to remove the caps because the UK government is selling 40 billion pounds worth of debts, 3.6 million students to this private equity group. And they also are hiring debt collectors at the same time. That's the government. To help the Rothschild get the debt paid back that they're retroactively raising on student debt. Remember, when the student debt started, it was a top-up fee. Now it's a, we're going to break your legs unless you give us our money fee. HSBC takes a $700 million charge for the Mexico fine. We talked about that. Bank admits to laundering was shameful, it says. 1.3, oh, you're back, how's it going? Hey, nice to see you again. Looking good. All right, I'm always nervous at these things. It's like, oh, let me just get my gun. No. Yeah, he's here. Yeah. Oh, what's that? Oh, yeah, he came all the way to fucking Glasgow. Should I take him out? Okay, 10-4 on that. Oh, great. Well, it's a great place to die, isn't it? You know, I got a castle up here. Did I mention that? The Caverlock Castle is the Maxwell clan castle. That's me. I'm Maxwell. That's my middle name. Timothy Maxwell Keiser. I'm a goddamn lord here, so bow down, motherfucker. You think I'm a, civilian? Oh, no. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So, HSBC, $700 million fine because they laundered all that Mexican money. They admit to laundering the money and they feel bad about it. And the CEO at the time, Stuart Gulliver, says, quote, "The firm clearly lost its way." Oh, clearly, with a Coke spoon hanging out of his nose. Barclays is sorry for LIBOR rigging, as profits beat estimates. Here's a great one. So, the UK has an enormous amount of debt. And all this austerity hasn't reduced debt. The austerity has increased the debt. The deficit is like flat, but the debt in the UK, Osborne's created like 600 million pounds of fresh debt. So UK debt's getting close to 2 trillion pounds of debt. That's over 100% of GDP. And to make that number look smaller as compared to GDP, so you have two choices. Either you reduce the debt, but that would mean getting rid of these zombie banks, or you figure out a way to make the debt look smaller compared to GDP. So to make GDP bigger, the UK government is now including drugs and prostitution in their GDP calculation. The Office of National Statistics estimates that each of UK's 60,879 prostitutes took 25 clients a week at an average price of £67.16. Fellas, by the way, is that about right? I don't know. Let me just. They also estimate that, according to the UK Office of National Statistics, 38,000 heroin users with sales of 754 million pounds worth of heroin, assuming 37 pounds a gram. So the UK government is now including this in their calculation for UK GDP. Why? Because it makes the debt look smaller. Otherwise, why would you include fucking drugs and prostitution in your GDP? Well, terrorism's got to be included in there. Everything's included in there. These guys, so the global debt to GDP around the world is now 435% versus 403% in 2007. The UK pays £1 billion per week in interest. Just in interest on that debt. Here's a way to increase GDP in America. The case for dwarf tossing. A Republican in Florida is going to stimulate the GDP by bringing back dwarf tossing. In Georgia, they consider replacing firefighters with free prison labor. In the UK, the Working Prison Initiative, Justice Secretary Kenneth Clark wants prisoners to work 40-hour weeks. He's got the backing of the country's largest jail operators, G4S, a private equity group that would love free slave jail labor. Fury in the UK as rail fares in the north rise by 162%. Think about that in relation to what Mark Carney just said, that the risk to this economy is deflation. That's right, deflation. That's the risk in this economy. Even though rail prices are up 162%, deflation is, it's because the risk is deflation, you see, we have to keep interest rates at the Bank of England near zero. See, 0% interest proves there's deflation. That's right. And the fact that it has managed to inflate asset prices for the 2 or 3% that own the assets and hasn't done a stick of good for anyone else, we're not going to take that into consideration. The fact that the actual CPI number or inflation number that the government uses to justify inflation doesn't include stuff that actually goes up in price, we're not going to bother with that either. We're just going to look at stuff that goes down in price, like slave-made shit and sold at Primark. And we're going to consider your iPhone 6 because it's twice the processing capacity. That means it costs you half as much. And see, there's no inflation. So you up north who are paying 162% more for your rail fee, you're just fucking crybears. You know what you suffer from? Economic illiteracy. So you're economically illiterate. You're just too stupid. You think that 162% increase in rail fare is inflationary? What are you, stupid? Man, you know, behind the show, when we do the show over by Tower of London, there is the Tower of London. You know, it's there for a reason. Woo, baby! Oh, speaking of cheating on inflation, Margaret Thatcher introduced something called RPI-X, which she called inflation without the nasty bits. So this is the same thing in the United States and the same thing in the UK. Every time there's something in the basket of goods that suggests that there's inflation, they change the basket. As she says, inflation minus the nasty bits. That's what they use for. They want to keep interest rates low because they have to refinance all the bad debt on all these banks' books. If the interest rates were to rise based on the actual economic activity of the economy, then the banks would immediately become insolvent. HSBC, Lloyd's Bank, RBS, and HSBC, Lloyd's, RBS, and Barclays, those four banks are technically insolvent. If you were to do an actual accounting of their assets to liabilities, you would come up with a massively negative number. Look at a bank like JP Morgan in New York. They have $90 trillion in debt, or derivatives. The global GDP is 60 trillion. They have more debt than the global GDP. Same thing with Deutsche Bank. In the UK, the infinite rehypothecation, take all the debt of all the big four banks in the UK, including RBS, and it's insanely overvalued. You don't want this bank. Tell them to go fucking pound sand. We don't want them. We'll take the oil, you keep the debt. Fuck you. Yeah. Okay, Warren Buffett, who's a very cheeky fellow, he's very outspoken, he says, there's a class war, all right, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making war, and we're winning. He's not hiding the fact. He's not pretending like this is not the case. They create quantitative easing and asset buyback programs and the propaganda that the BBC shovels in your face like horse shit. They do all that because they like making lots of money without taking any risk. Warren Buffett doesn't take any risk. He's not a capitalist in that sense. He's a guy who sits under a bridge and people throw money down at him from various banks. That's about all he does. London house prices rise by a record £588 a day. Purely from quantitative easing, purely from free money being printed by the Fed. Now, on the other side of the coin, okay, let's move from the Warren Buffetts of the world to everybody else. 1 million new payday loans every month. Wonga raises interest rates to 5,853%. If Wonga had to pay the same interest rate on the fine that they've just been levied by engaging in usury, their liability would be $203 trillion, pounds. The cost of bailouts to the public here in the UK are 47 pounds of new debt for every 1 pound in GDP. So I'm going to finish now with some quotes, and then I'll be done. And I've done my. I did this exactly on time, which is very rare, but there you go. These are the quotes I'm going to end with. This is from Mark Carney. Jailing bankers will not fix bad behavior, says Mark Carney. Sean Fitzpatrick, former CEO of Anglo-Irish. The cause of our problem was global, so I can't say sorry with any kind of sincerity. I suggest you cut the sacred cows of Irish society, children, the elderly, and healthcare. Jeremy Clarkson, execute public sector workers, says BBC's Top Gun host. Larry Summers says, Paul Krugman, who was recently on Newsnight, he's also said, Paul Krugman, who's suggesting that you all are economically illiterate and you don't understand it when you're getting your fucking intestines ripped out by banking shits. He said also, Alan Greenspan needs to create a housing bubble to replace the NASDAQ bubble. Exactly what happened, and it burst, and this is what happened. Tony Blair, I could cash in a lot more than I do. Paul Krugman, my proposal is that we have to get a bunch of scientists to tell us we're facing an alien invasion, and in order to be prepared for that invasion, we have to do things like build high-speed rail, and once we're recovered, we can say, look, there were no aliens. That's what Newsnight has on as their expert. Am I on against Paul Krugman on that show? No. No, we're not. Bill Black, who's a regulator in America. London is a financial regulatory cesspit. H-Boss, Paul Moore. London is the center of a financial holocaust. And my last quote, I'm leaving you with this. I'm leaving you with two quotes. The first is from John Locke. Speaking of historical references, then you're having an historic little, vote coming up. In 1790, he said, when the social contract is broken, the people must revolt. And finally, from Frederick Bastiat, 1850, quote, when plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men living together in society, they create for themselves, in the course of time, a legal system that authorizes plunder and a moral code that glorifies plunder. Ladies and gentlemen, I say vote yes.
Thank you. Thank you.